Hello and welcome to this next video tutorial. So in the last tutorial, I showed you how to import a turnaround, and we went over tie downs right here. And so to create this tie down, I created a new drawing layer that had that was vector, and then I filled in the line work. And so what I'm going to show you today is how to color this in. And I'm going to divide this into two tutorials here. So this first tutorial, we're going to go over the fundamentals of creating a palette and getting started filling in a character. And then in the next tutorial, and keep an eye out for it here, is I'm going to show how to fill in your character if your character has like two-tone shadows like this, or if they have, for instance, you see these eyes at the bottom, there's not an outline at the bottom of there. And so I'll show you two techniques that will let you fill in characters like this in the coming tutorial here. But this first one, we're just going to focus on the fundamentals of just coloring in a basic character here. So I have my line art right here, and I have my turnaround right here. And so the first thing I need to do is create a color palette for my character. So you should look right here in the right side of your panel, and there should be a color panel. If you don't see it, you can go to Windows and then find it right here. And you can see in Toonboom that we have this kind of basic palette that we start with, and we need to create our own palette for this character here. And so something that's really important to keep in mind is I created my tie downs with vector art right here instead of bitmap art. So to create my palette, I'm going to first, there's these two areas right here. So this top area, I'm going to create a new palette by pressing this plus button, and we can title this. So I'll just call this character 1 right here and press OK. And you can see we have the project palette, but then we have this character palette that I just created right here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn around my concept art right here and zoom in on it some, and create the colors of this character one by one. And so the first thing I have is I have the line art right here. And if I remember correctly, this is not quite a black, it's a little bit more of like a dark brown right here. And so for this first color, I'm going to double click on the color. And you can go in and you can manually kind of change the color right here, but you also have this eyedropper tool. So I can just click and hold this eyedropper and drag it down onto the line art right there. And you can see right here it says default, and it also says default right there. I can also name it, so I can just call this line, and all I need to do is just cross it out right there. And we're just going to do that one at a time right here. So I'll press 1 to zoom out a little bit. All right, so let's keep building this up. So I'm going to press the plus button again. You can see it creates a new color. Double click, and then eyedropper tool, and I'll do the hair next, and we can title that. So each time I'm adding a new color into the palette, it's this plus button. I double click on the new color that comes up. And then since I have this concept art, I can just do the eyedropper and just drag it on and rename it each time. And I find it's really helpful to name each of these colors as you continue to add them right here. Okay, so I've created my color palette right here. And to finish off this first video tutorial, what I'm going to show is just how to fill in a basic character. So I'm going to turn off my turnaround art. And so remember, we have our line art right here, which we created on this art layer. And again, we're looking at this drawing layer in the timeline. And so what I need to do is I like to have my line art on this, and then I like to copy it down to the color art layer right there. And so what you do is you can drag and select like that. And then under the tool properties of the selection tool, we're looking for this button right here, which creates color art from the line art. You can also find that same button right here. And I just click that. And what that does is it copies the line art's stroke down to the color art. And so the stroke are these blue lines that you see right here. And you can toggle their visibility by pressing K. So if you don't see these strokes, press K. And so these strokes are not visible in the final render, and they're just kind of like this magical vector information from the lines that work as a guide within the color art layer. And so it makes it so that we can use the paint bucket tool and fill in our character on the color art. And they're going to be on separate art layers. That makes it so that we can kind of deal with them independently here. And so I'm going to turn back on my color palette. And so for this, I'm just going to fill in the character really roughly, right? Because this character is supposed to have shadows. And this video tutorial, we're just focusing on simple characters here. So I'm going to click on the hair paint bucket, fill that in, and fill in these areas right here. And let's just see if I can get one to not fill in correctly here. There we go. So you can see when I tried to fill in that part of the eye, it fills in the whole character right there. So this kind of goes down to what we talked about in tie downs. But we can see here, if I zoom in on this, there's this little gap right there in the line. So if and when you run into this, and most likely you'll run into this at some point, what I like to do is I like to click on the paint bucket tool, go down to stroke right here, and just draw a line through it like right there. And so now when I go in to fill this area, when I go back to the paint bucket tool, that'll fill in right there. And let's just try a few more, and I'm just going to fill in this character in a really basic way. I'll fill in the skin. And so these blue lines right here are not going to show up. And so something that's nice here is, again, we have our line art right here, we have our color art right there, and we're working in the camera mode. This is the main mode that I like to work in here. But if you switch over to the drawing mode, and there's this eye visibility button when you're in the drawing mode that comes into play right here. So I have that turned on. And so when I have the line art selected, I can just see the line art. And when I have the color art selected, I can just see the color art. So you can kind of see them independently right there. And again, this button right here needs to be enabled right there in order for me to switch back and forth between those. And that's really most of what you need to know for filling in a character here. But what I want to show next, I'm going to divide this into the next tutorial, and I'll provide a link in the description, is how to fill in a character when they have these shadows